Well, good evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock on the 2nd of November even, and this is the meeting of the Epping Forest District Council Area Planning Committee East. Before I start, I have to read this out for the benefit of those members of the public in the chamber. I would like to remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers on Zoom do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Okay, thank you. Once again, welcome everybody, welcome members of the public and officers. My name's Ian Hadley, I'm the chairman for the evening. On my left I have Councillor Heather Brady, who's vice chairman, Rebecca Perry on Democratic Services, and Andrew Marks from Planning, and Becky working with switches, which control our audio. Okay, item 2, advice to public speakers. Correct? Good. Item 3, apologies for absence.
I've got apologies from Councillor Stalker and lateness from Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Item 4.
Chairman, apologies from Councillor Holly Whitbread.
Okay. Item 4. Oh, another one. Sorry.
Apologies from Chris Whitbread, who will be late.
Any more? Okay. Item 4, I'll try again. Declarations of interest. Councillor Amos.
Thank you. I'm a member of Thaden Boyce Parish Council Planning Committee, and we've been consulted on a number of these matters that are here tonight, but as I say at that committee, and I say here again, I will base whatever decision I make tonight on the arguments I hear this evening. I will remain in the chamber and vote at the end. Thank you.
Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. On agenda item 12, one of the neighbours is well known to me, but my interest is not prejudicial, so I shall remain in the chamber.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm sorry, under lateness, I forgot to mention, actually, not only Chris Whitbread, but also Nigel Bedford.
It was
did I do
mentioned.
it?
Anybody else? Janet.
Yes, Chairman, it's not a prejudiced interest. I live in the same section of Hughes Avenue as the applicant in number 12, but I can't see the house of mine and I don't know the applicant, so I'll stay in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And myself, I declare a non-pecuniary interest in number 14, again because it's in my parish and I'm on the parish council, but it's non-pecuniary, so I will be voting.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? No. Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting. Does everybody agree with those minutes and then I sign them off? Correct? Thank you. Any other business?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, item 7 is the planning policy briefing note. I take it we're all well briefed on that. Thank you. Site visits. Anybody? Looks like nobody's asking for a site visit. Thank you. Okay, let's move to the body of the meeting. Item 9, planning application EPF 22212220, 11 Kendall Avenue. That's pages 37 to 58. And the officer's decision is, or recommendation is to approve. Andrew, you take us through that?
This one will be remotely presented by Juma Ahmed, one of our planning officers.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Hope you can all hear me well. The application, as the Chair has just referred, reference number EPF 212220, The address is number 11 Kendall Avenue, which is located in the Hemel ward of Epping. The application proposals are for full planning permission for a 4-bed detached dwelling, including driveway and detached garage to the rear garden curtilage of number 11 Kendall Avenue. So everybody can probably see the application site split into two, obviously number 11 and its garden curtilage as seen here, edged in blue, and edged in red is the planning application site, which is inclusive, obviously, the proposed new driveway leading into the back. So this is an aerial image, of course, just giving an idea of the kind of, the application site and its its more immediate surroundings rather than the wider surroundings. What's obvious here from this particular image is that there is some evidence, obviously, of some previous backland development, which is pertinent to, obviously, the consideration here too. Obviously, quite clearly pointed out here, this is number 11. And the nearest neighbours to the rear of 11A, Kendall, is White Beams. There are protected trees within the site itself that members should be aware of, and these can quite clearly be shown here and along the other side to the front and side, the majority of which actually sit along the boundary of number 11, but between the boundary of 11 and 11A. Some site photographs. This is the side image of, obviously, where the driveway access will be created. These are a suite of images showing the rear garden curtilage of where the property or the proposals, would be located. So if you can see my red laser, just effectively just pointing out the actual property itself will sit more or less behind this small shed area here at the present time. The image just being shown here is obviously the eastern boundary, or part of the eastern boundary. So the second and third image here are the eastern boundary showing in different directions. This is looking back, so the fourth image is looking back towards number 11. And obviously the garden house stroke shed structure. Again, this is a slightly wider view of obviously looking back towards number 11 from where, in effect, the new development would sit. In fact, I believe this, if everyone can see on the screen there, where I'm kind of pointing out with the laser, that's roughly where the actual property, the proposed property, would actually commence effectively. That's the boundary line effectively. And this is obviously an image of, this last image is showing the garden boundary line with number 9. These are the proposed plans, just showing the layouts. It's pretty much, it's kind of a T-shaped development on its side. This is the driveway access off of number 11. Off of Kendall Avenue, apologies, which will run along the side adjacent to the current property itself. This is, I've included this slide, obviously, to detail the actual driveway construction, which we can always come back to if need be. And this is a section of the site itself in relation to, so the application proposal is shown in the centre of this image here. And relative to the left and right is obviously the existing properties, 115 Ravensmere and 11A Kendall Avenue. So this will be White Beams effectively that sits here. It's a section drawing. Okay, the location, design and appearance of the proposed dwelling and associated driveway are the same as those previously considered by this committee in 2019 before being refused. Members will also be mindful that the previous refusal was appealed to the Planning Inspectorate, which importantly upheld the appellant's grounds presented on the two main issues of concern before being dismissed on SAC grounds only. The previous grounds for refusal, including a decision letter of pins, have been appended to the published report, pages 47 and 53. Whilst the Planning Inspectorate's decisions not binding on a council, they are instructive in that they provide an unambiguous independent planning view. Officers have given material weight to the considerations made by the Planning Inspectorate and on balance agree to its conclusions in that A, no harm would be caused to the established street character in terms of location design of the proposed new driveway, and B, no harm would be caused to the established character and pattern of development in the area, nor the amenities of the neighbouring occupiers, particularly at White Beams. With regard to the only remaining issue upon which the previous appeal was dismissed, the impact on the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation, the Council could feasibly and practically mitigate the identified impacts by condition and financial contributions as recommended by the Council's own adopted strategic-wide strategies. So overall, the proposed scheme represents an acceptable form of development which will not cause detrimental harm to the character and appearance of the established area, nor the existing amenities of neighbouring occupiers. Therefore, the application has been recommended for approval subject to the conditions cited on pages 54 to 58 of the agenda, including a section 106 to secure financial contributions in relation to mitigating the recreation and air pollution effects of the development proposed. That is the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kumar. We have 3 speakers on this. The first one, being an objector, is Mr. Clifford Mitchell. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, the access drive. Now, the width of the access drive is 3 metres, particularly where it runs alongside 11 Kendall Avenue. It is also in excess of 20 metres in length. This does not comply with the National Planning Policy Framework, which states that the access drive must be suitable for the emergency services. The access requirements for the fire service are a minimum width of 3.7 metres, and an appliance must not have to reverse more than 20 metres. So it does not comply. Further, in the report from Environmental Protection and Drainage, it states that they're proposing to dispose of surface water by sustainable drainage soakaway. The geology of the area is predominantly clay, and infiltration drainage may not be suitable for the site. If the main sewer is to be utilised, then a restricted discharge will be required. Now, if this happens, particularly in areas of high rainfall, all of this water will actually discharge into White Beams, which is a metre lower than the development site, and this will be concentrated water from a building, covered building site. I think this would cause damage of flooding to White Beams, and consequently, I think it will have a detrimental effect on White Beams in amenity and functional terms. Further, the applicant proposes to dispose of foul water drainage by a septic tank. The same report says this is not permissible, and the foul water must be connected to the main sewer in Kendall Avenue. The arborological report does not cover any of the excavation works which would be required to actually connect the foul water drainage to the main sewer, which will potentially go through a tree root protection area, and the impact of this should be considered, prior to planning permission being given, in my view. And if this is the case, there will be significant work and could potentially change the views of the landscape and trees report, which had concerns but no objection, based only on incoming services, being water, electricity, and telecoms, which are much easier to lay through the site, through the tree root protection zone. So do think that there is a detriment to the amenity and functionality of white beams. I believe this doesn't comply with the National Planning Policy Framework, which the Council passed a motion saying all new developments must comply with. And I don't think the report from Trees and Landscape has considered all of the requirements of this development. Thank you.
Don't think you heard any of that.
Shouldn't we just keep pressing on with them now?
Sorry?
Shouldn't we just press on with the other?
Okay, rather than do it. Thank you very much. Forget I said that. Okay, the next person is Councillor Nigel Avey from Epping Town Council. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The Town Council originally saw this application some time ago, a couple of years ago, so I have circulated members of the Planning Committee to ensure that their views given 2 years ago are the same now. They are. Our views are unchanged. I think this is classic garden grabbing and should be resisted. We have in the past and we should do now. The access is limited to the rear, as the gentleman over here has just pointed out, and the proposed driveway arrangements, I think, are contrived and impractical. I am concerned about the trees as well, because I'm not sure. I had a look today, I can't see how the driveway will work. I also noted, and the committee noted, this garden backs onto green belt land. It's right behind the garden. This matter hasn't been taken into consideration. And in the past, members of the committee and Plans West, on which I sit, have often seen applications resisted by the planning officers because of impact on the green belt. Yet this hasn't been taken into consideration at all in this application. All in all, we think, the Town Council think this application should be resisted, and I hope the committee will object to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Mr. Tom Whiffen, who's the applicant's agent. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the second time this application has been seen at this committee, and this follows an appeal decision back in January 2020. The appeal was dismissed based on one reason, which was the integrity of the SAC. This is one of many cases that's been held for nearly 2.5 years because of the SAC issue. The committee should note that a cost application was also submitted against the council, and it was partially approved by the Planning Inspectorate. We are, though, yet to make a claim on this. In his report, the Appeal Inspector says in his conclusion, I consider the effect on the character and appearance of the area and the neighbours' living conditions would not be unacceptable. Epping Town Council state that design and construction of the driveway is unsuitable for a conservation area. However, Kendall Avenue is not within the conservation area. They also state that the new home would be out of character. However, each house on Kendall Avenue is different and unique, and we've positioned the house that is a good distance away from neighbouring properties. The last point they make is that the site was designed for only one dwelling. If this was the case, how comes at number 3 Kendall Avenue they've been able to develop the site to create over 5 homes? Housing is required, and we need to make the best use of brownfield sites, which this is, to prevent sprawling onto the green belt. In regard to the SAC issue, we have prepared a habitat regulation assessment, and if you vote to approve this scheme, we will sign the Section 106 agreements and pay the relevant fees to the council to offset any impact to the development. Epping Forest Tree Team hasn't objected, and extensive tree reports and structural engineering designs, as you saw, have been carried out to avoid any impact on the trees. Essex Highways have also not objected. Planning consents have been granted in past for similar backland developments within the same street, as listed in the officer's report, such as number 3 Kendall Avenue, number 15 Kendall Avenue, Coppice and Stepping Stones, houses at the end of a private road next to 11 Kendall Avenue, and the Ravensmere cul-de-sac. The proposal will provide a quality new home utilising infill development, which is not within the green belt. As with all new homes, it will have a high level of insulation, good quality double or triple glazing, and EV charging points. I trust that you can support and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, the ward member? Councillor Jenny Whitehouse.
Chairman, I wonder if the officer could answer the points raised by the objector, because we didn't get an answer to that.
Thank you. Kumar, did you?
Hello, yeah. So the first issue in terms of the emergency vehicle, the suitability of the access for emergency vehicles, that's not really an issue for planning officers to consider. That's more an issue that needs to be resolved through the building regulations at a point when, you know, post-planning effectively. So that's not necessarily an issue for us to actually be concerned by. The second point, in terms of obviously the integrity of the existing trees in that location, of course, yes, I have identified that there are some protected trees there, although the applicant has rigorously, you know, demonstrated through their own arboricultural method statement how the construction of that driveway could be carried out without causing significant harm to those trees in terms of their long-term health and integrity. Our own internal tree officer has obviously assessed all of that information as well and has not objected, although has noted that any services, as has been mentioned by the objector, and how they would be accommodated within that access, how that could be dealt with. But, you know, so there is a condition, and I believe that's condition, let me just find out where we are. I think that was condition number 7. Apologise. Yeah, number 10 rather, sorry. Condition number 10 on the recommendations that where services would have to actually be incorporated within the driveway, details would have to be agreed with the LPA, with the council itself. Yeah, I hope I've answered most of those questions. The last question that was raised, I believe, was the drainage within the site itself. Again, internal consultation, as normally happens here, is we consult with our land drainage section. They've again not objected to these proposals, subject to further information being provided relating to foul and surface water drainage within the site. So that will obviously happen in the normal course of events. Should planning permission be granted, that the applicant would need to submit that information before commencement of development itself. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to speak, please? Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, officers, for the report. It was just regarding to the point on flooding. I note in the document that condition 4 references the flood mitigation strategy. I just wondered, for the benefit of the objector, whether it could just be confirmed by officers that should the application not be supported by the flood mitigation, what the process would be from that point onwards, just to clarify that point, because it did strike me the gradient of that was displayed in the presentation. And the other point I just wanted to make was I do have some sympathy about the Town Council's objection and their comments and indeed their concerns about a precedent, but it does appear that a precedent has already been set in a rather greater way. I guess the point I find myself with this balanced application is many people do not want us to build on the green belt, which then requires us to look at other ways to build homes. And as far as I'm concerned, perhaps this development would potentially in the future protect the green belt behind it from being developed, but that's obviously not a material consideration, but something in my mind that I thought I would mention. But yeah, I would just appreciate, for the sake of the objector, some clarity on the flood mitigation and what the outcome would be should the application fail the necessary requirements.
Kumar?
The process for agreeing any future information that's supplied by the applicant will need to obviously meet the expectations of our land drainage section before any development can obviously proceed. I mean, I can't honestly comment on behalf of our land drainage section. However, you know, they are our technical experts on the matter, normally they would have raised significant issues with us very early on, and in this case they hadn't done so. If there were, should we say, fundamental issues in respect to drainage on this site, they obviously feel that there is, the opportunity here to obviously address, drainage, surface water drainage, as well as obviously foul drainage successfully, should a planning permission be granted. As I say, that kind of matter will be dealt with at a post-planning stage should a planning permission eventually be given this evening. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I mean, if we've heard, backland development, there's quite a lot of it in Kendall Avenue, but I think it is important when you've got that sort of development, particularly sensitive to the impact on the surrounding houses, because rather than the houses just being in line, I mean, effectively the plot's got, surrounded on three sides by existing residences. But we do need to bear in mind, in half it's, 1.5 or perhaps 2-storey building. And that's gone into quite a lot of detail on the appeal decision. And if it's an identical building to that which went to appeal, clearly we've got to have regard to what would happen if it went to appeal again. I did have some concerns about the sort of scale of the drive, which was a fairly substantial civil engineering operation for that particular location. Again, that is dealt with in the inspector's report, and that is conditioned. The only thing I'd say is that I'd hope and expect that the arboricultural, when the plans come, before the specialist officers, to look at, given that it will involve services coming through that drive, that it's very sort of rigorously and robustly looked at by the arboricultural officers. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
Oh, well, John Phillips.
John. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. I remember going on a site visit to this site. I guess that would probably been back in 2018. And the discussion that we had at Planning Committee following that, where I did not support the recommendation to grant. I've read the inspector's report in detail, and I have to say I don't agree with them. I can't see anything that changes my view at this point. However, I do take on board what Councillor Whitehouse has said in terms of looking at future appeal decisions. So I am not proposing that we refuse this, but I will not be able to support it.
Thank you.
Now I can speak.
Councillor Brady.
Hello. Yes. Well, I would just like to support what Councillor Whitehouse said, really, that this has been to appeal. The inspector was quite happy with what the tree specialist said, what the land drainage people said, what the highways people said. He was quite happy that one house in this very large plot will not be setting a precedent. They're already much developed, the back gardens around here. So on that basis, I did the site visit as well. A good number of us went there. So we are aware, of the area and what we're talking about. And I think we do have to be mindful that the inspector was quite happy with this, apart from the SAC. So I think you've got to bear that in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. In which case, I think...
Chairman, Councillor McCready's on Zoom. Would like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor McCready. Councillor McCready.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes.
Yes, sorry, I have had my hand up quite a long time. I wondered when I was going to be picked up. Like some of the other councillors, I was at the site visit. And I know we have to look at each application on its own merits. But making reference to page 42, and it says, members will have noted that the proposed scheme is the same, if not identical, to the appealed scheme. You can read the rest of the paragraph for yourself. I don't see, other than reference to the SAC, that any other thing has been altered. And I'm very, very concerned about overdevelopment here and the effect on white beams. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got this note here. Will you take this, please, Andrew?
Just before members go to the vote, I just thought I'd point out that it's usual procedures for us to remove permitted development rights for new houses and dwellings. Now, you'll see that condition 5 removes Class B, which is roof extensions, but it is usual practice for us to add Class A, which is extensions to dwellings, and Class E, which is for outbuildings. So members might just want to discuss whether they want to add those two classes of permitted development to be removed to condition 5.
Councillor Whitehouse.
Yes, I suggest that we do, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else suggest that we don't?
I'll second that.
You second that. Can we have a vote on that, please? The vote is to add those, remove the permitted development for Class A and Class E. Again, those who agree? Thank you. Right, now, nothing else I don't think, so I think we come to the vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation to grant, please raise your hands now.
That's 8, Chairman.
Thank you. Those against?
That's none, Chairman.
Abstaining?
That's 7, Chairman.
Okay, in which case the application is granted. Thank you. Sorry, sorry. Okay. Those members who came late, do you have any declarations of interest? Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, no declaration of interest. Apologies for lateness. I was on another Zoom meeting somewhere.
Apologies for Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Apologies for lateness, coming from another meeting from the other side of Essex, but so my apologies. And just to make it clear, the reason I abstained on the last item was I wasn't here for the full report and debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Councillor Castor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to give my apologies for being late and say I have no declarations of interest, and I did not vote on this matter because I didn't hear the officers, the full officers' comments. The 414 appeared to be completely blocked.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, I think we've finished with that now. So the next one is item 10. Which is EPF 2408/20, 8 Kimpton Close, Ongar. And the recommendation is to approve. And that is Kumar again, I believe?
It is, yes. Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned, the application bearing reference EPF 2408/20 is an application that's seeking full planning permission for a 3-bed end of terrace dwelling. Should be obviously attached to number 8 Kimpton Close. Also mentioned was the officer's recommendation is for planning permission to be granted subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement to obviously secure relevant SAC related contributions, financial contributions. So the application site itself is shown here, edged in red. It's a site located in the Shelley ward of the parish of Ongar, comprises the existing side garden of number 8 Kimpton Close. So this is again another aerial here, just showing you the dimensions, obviously the side garden and the rear garden of number 8, and also the on-street parking area that is, for the dwellings in this specific location, although they're not assigned specifically to those dwellings. This is a photograph of so partly number 8 in this image here, and this is the application site and the frontage currently secured by the Harris fencing along here. This is the tall hedge on the other side that's running along with the pathway, which runs along the side of the site. It's probably perhaps a better image showing the site layout and obviously the way the building itself sits within the site itself. Yeah. So the proposed dwelling here, in terms of its relationship with the host building. Actual design itself, fairly rudimentary, kind of similar to the, not identical to the host dwelling itself. So the proposed dwelling in respect to its design, scale and appearance is similar to the host dwelling, therefore not appear cramped or out of keeping with the cul-de-sac in which it is located. In addition, no harm to residential amenity in regard to daylight and sunlight or privacy of surrounding occupiers would occur. In terms of parking, whilst no provision on site is to be provided, the applicant's analysis of parking stress in the immediate location demonstrates that sufficient capacity will be available to accommodate any additional parking demand. There are equally no highway safety issues arising as a result of this arrangement. The impact proposed on the SAC, again, can be mitigated in accordance with the recommended measures cited in Council's adopted strategic-wide strategies. That is the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions again that members might have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no speakers on this one. So, members, over to you. Ward member? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. Looking at the site itself, it is quite a congested area there with where the school is, but I'd just like the officer just to confirm the amount of car parking spaces being provided. It does appear to be a good use of like a small piece of infill in an area that is gradually being, the little spots are being taken out. And apart from that, I would just like an update on the parking situation because it is quite close to the school.
Kumar?
Yes, hi. So the parking situation initially or originally when this application was submitted was that the applicant was going to provide 2 parking spaces to the front garden of the site. However, it was then deemed to be unacceptable by our tree section. There is a tree to the front of this site whereby a driveway would have to cross over, which would potentially impact or force the removal of that tree, which is on the highway. The applicant itself was persuaded to actually take the driveway off of the front of the property. So, in effect, there is no parking provided off-street for this. The parking would take place on street. And that is also why the applicant had provided officers with a parking stress survey, which was carried out in the surrounding immediate area. There's more information obviously contained in the report. Basically, it obviously identified that there was sufficient capacity in the evenings, as well as, for people to park within the area itself. May not necessarily mean immediately outside of the property, but certainly within the immediate vicinity to the property.
Thank you. Any other comments from any member?
Jim, I just wonder whether, like the last application, given that we're putting effectively a building on the end of what will become a terrace, whether this is one that we should also be looking to remove permitted development rights as we did the last one, because I think while as it currently stands it's probably reasonable, but if they were to put extensions on there as well, I think that might be a problem. I'll take guidance from my fellow councillor Ward, councillor, for whether we should be doing for outbuildings as well, but I think probably extensions and roof would be at least the minimum we should go for.
Green. Anybody second that, please? Second, right. So please, can you vote on whether we ought to remove permitted development from that application? Thank you. Okay. Great. And nobody else. Oh, one more. Councillor Jennings Whitehouse.
Councillor Phillips.
Sorry about the delay. Can we just go back to that tree that we've just heard about? I mean, I don't like to see the loss of trees, but is there something special about this tree? Because I do feel that the parking is inadequate. I mean, especially the family there with young children, they can't be parking miles away. I wasn't convinced by the amount of parking. I know highways haven't objected, but you know, is there something special about this tree since the applicant did provide parking spaces?
Kumar?
I'm probably not best placed to say whether there's something special necessary about this particular tree. However, it is a tree that sits outside of the actual application site. It sits on highway land, I believe, and there was some resistance, from our tree officers that they wouldn't really seek to allow a driveway that would go across that, irrespective of obviously perhaps you could argue that it may be desirable to get parking off street for the dwelling to relieve the street. However, that's where the parking stress survey that was carried out demonstrated that there wouldn't be additional impact in terms of the existing street. So with respect to things like the school and how mothers and fathers drop off the children, normally it would happen at a specific time in the mornings and in the afternoons. We're talking about a very short period of time in which people pick up their children and take them away from the site. We wouldn't feel that there would, there may be obviously an increase in congestion on the street, but it's not necessarily long-lived, and therefore, as I say, there was no need to demand that parking be reinstated to the front of the property.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? You see anybody? Okay. Okay, so it comes.
Wait a minute.
Sorry, just regarding the permitted development rights, we just need to be clear about which classes of permitted development rights we are removing. So, because there's an awful lot of them. The standard practice is for us to remove A, B, E, and F. So those are extensions to the dwelling. B is for roof extensions. E is for outbuildings, and F is for hard standing. So if members are happy with that, then those are the ones that we'll remove.
Are members happy with that? Okay, so I think we need a vote again on that one. All members happy? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, I think we've come to the time to vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation to approve, please show your hands.
It's 14 members, Chairman.
Thank you. Those against?
One, Chairman.
Those abstaining?
It's none, Chair.
Thank you. So that application then is granted. Thank you. Okay, the next one is item 11, which is application EPF 0770/22 67 Hemel Street, Epping. And the recommendation is to approve. I think you're doing that, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you're getting me at short notice tonight, so hopefully the presentation will go smoothly. Like we said, this is an application for an outbuilding at 67 Hemnall Street in Epping. And it's situated towards the lower end of Hemnall Street near Bell Common. This is the site over here. It's quite a large property. Some information provided earlier today actually confirms that that house has now been demolished, and I'll get to why that is relevant for this application if members want to get to the discussion on that. So this is an aerial photograph of the site over here. And that was the house that was previously standing there. So these are the elevation drawings of the building. It's a utilitarian type building that's going to be constructed out of black timber boarding and a felt roof. It is composed of a closed section, which is this longer area here, which consists of a store area, and not shown on this drawings, but there's also what's referred to as a garden water closet on the plans and drawings. And then this section over here is an open area, so not covered on the sides, but under a roof. So we've had a number of representations, including from neighbours, as you can see on page 74, and also from the Town Council. The main reasons for objection is the scale of the development and also impact on neighbouring amenity. In terms of the design, officers consider this is a standard type outbuilding, and as the site's not situated in a conservation area, we don't consider there's any special or legislative requirement to protect the area. Then the other objection raised by a neighbour was the impact on amenity. As you can see on page 75 of the report, the houses in the area are sort of between 12 and 17 metres away from the outbuilding. The reason why I'm showing this slide is in 2021, in July, there was planning permission granted for a replacement house on this site. You will see on this slide the orange outline there is where the current, or the house that used to be there stood, and what you see here is the footprint of the house that's been given planning permission. The reason why I'm raising that at this time is that clearly this can't be an outbuilding that's being built for a house that's no longer there, so members might want to consider, if you are minded to grant planning permission, to add a condition to make sure that the outbuilding is only constructed after the new house is being built. And if you're happy to delegate the wording of that condition to us, officers can look at applying that for you. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers again. So first the objector, Ms. Elizabeth Byrne. Thank you. Would you put a microphone on, please? And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk tonight. My name is Claire Bernard, and along with my family, we shall be living in the house which is being built on the site of 67 Hemnall Street. I have lived in Epping for over 15 years, and my son Frederick and William both go to school in Epping. My father and mother have lived in Epping for over 25 years. My brother also lives in Epping. We were thrilled when the council approved the new house in July 2021, which meant we could stay in Epping, close to everyone. As you may be aware, the house we are building does not include a garage, so storage of outdoor furniture or bikes is going to be an issue for us, which is the primary use for this outbuilding, alongside storing our young children's garden toys. The space will also be an area where they can play during the summer and be able to safely enjoy their garden. We have included a small toilet and sink for this reason also, so the children will not have to enter the house to use these amenities. The sink will also provide an area for us to be able to wash our hands with hot water after cleaning up after our dog or gardening. Therefore, we do not need to be opening any doors or to enter the house with dirty hands. We acknowledge and appreciate the neighbours and the parish council's concerns, which appear to be the loss of amenity due to the height and overbearing, causing loss of light, overshadowing and design of the build. In the officer's report, he states that the design of the building is a common one found within urban areas and is considered that the scale, design and external materials would not be out of keeping with the surrounding area. He goes on to say, due to the modest size, bulk and scale of the proposed development, as well as its significant distance to the neighbouring dwellings, it is concluded that there will not be significant harm to the living conditions. Comments have been made about the use of the building for further accommodation. This would not be possible. As you can see from the plans, the outbuilding does not include heating, insulation, and is not meant to be slept in or used for any other purpose than which was stated. I repeat, this is to be used as a storage unit, as you find in most gardens. The design is in keeping with outbuildings in Essex, using locally sourced materials, and will complement the house. We have also moved the building away from boundaries, which is in line with the council's recommendations. In regard to drainage, there is a new foul and surface water drainage system approved by the planning condition in place, which was inspected and approved by EFDC's Building Control Development. Please look favourably on this application, which will be our lifetime home. Thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I apologise for getting out of sequence here. In fact, the first speaker should be Mr. Ian White, who's a rejecter. If you can speak now, and you have 3 minutes. Sorry about that.
Good evening, everybody. I am Ian White. I live at number 65 Hemel Street and will be Claire's neighbour. I have to object to this application, unfortunately. I am in our forever home, and I've lived in this home for 23 years. We're seeing the development that's going on next door, and quite clearly it is an overdevelopment for the site. I'm glad that you put up the picture of the house that's currently being built, because that gives you an idea of the footprint that's already been absorbed. If you put the other picture up as well of the plan, I just wanted to point out that the orientation of the outbuilding is incorrect. So effectively, our conservatory to the end of the garden is 18 metres long. This development will be 8 metres long along our boundary wall and 3 metres high. A standard garden fence is 1.8 metres high, so you can imagine how much extra height this solid mass of block is going to have an impact on our garden. Now, we're not talking about our living house as such as being affected, and none of the neighbours are. What we are very concerned and upset about, and would like this application to be refused for, is the loss of light and the damage it's going to have on our gardens. Our gardens are going to be severely affected because of the shadowing. We also have a summer house which is right next door to this proposed outbuilding. That is going to be dwarfed and overshadowed as well. We don't object to an outbuilding at all. In fact, we quite expected it. However, it is far too high and it is far too large for the purpose, which Claire's given the purpose. Why does it have to be so big? On the plan, it has an open area. We can't see it being an open area on the plan. It's a fully enclosed area. So in summary, myself and my direct neighbours, as well as the neighbours behind, which are bungalows and Faden Place, will have a 3 metre high outbuilding casting significant loss of light over their gardens. And it will significantly impact us in the summer for the enjoyment of the garden that we have currently and we have had for the last 23 years. So a pitched roof or a different design, yes, we could look at. But unfortunately, the current application we have to strongly object to, and with regret, I'm afraid, Claire. We'd appreciate committee support in protecting ours and our neighbours' enjoyment of our gardens. We're not talking about our houses, we're talking about our gardens, and refusing this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One other thing, if I may, I do apologise. I wanted to point out that the groundworks and the drainage have already been completed on this site. They are a condition number 5 of the officer's report. I don't understand how already the groundworks could have been completed if it's not even been approved by committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Nigel Avey from Epping Town Council. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chairman, and thankfully I can hear the committee. I couldn't hear a word before they eventually turned on the speakers, so it has all become clear and I'm not running off to get a hearing aid tomorrow, thank goodness. Well, you've heard the residents have objected to this outbuilding, including Mr White, who articulated really what the Town Council believe is the case. We consider it's too high and overbearing, and its design does not complement the setting, and it would be visible to neighbouring properties and affect their amenity accordingly. We would not normally object to outbuildings, but this is an exception, and I think it should be refused. Also, I can understand the residents feeling somewhat aggrieved at this because the main building has not been built yet, so it's a bit cart before the horse, quite frankly, in my view. And also at the moment they stare at a massive hole in the street scene, which the Town Council objected to the original property being demolished and this being built. But there we are. So I would strongly suggest you object to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, who would like to speak first? Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, outbuildings are a fairly standard feature of gardens, and lots of houses in this area have got outbuildings, and outbuildings of a certain size you can get without needing planning permission because they're permitted development. I don't have a particular issue with the design personally, but it's a bulk and scale which I think do deserve careful consideration. And the other thing I wondered if we could ask the planning officer to clarify is the orientation and relationship of the building or the proposed building to the neighbouring properties. It'd be helpful just to be clear on what the sun path is, given that's an issue that's been raised. And then if you just remind us of how this compares for the permitted development limits, that'd be helpful too. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah. Andrew, would you like to comment on that, please?
So this is the site plan that was submitted to us that shows, let me just try and make that a bit bigger. That shows it here at the bottom of the garden. Now clearly if you remember the other location plan, which I'll just call up, so that's at the bottom of the garden here, so clearly the sun will be coming this way. What I should say, though, is that the council's policies do not protect gardens in terms of sunlight and daylight. It does protect habitable rooms in houses.
Thank you.
Sorry, and the other question was the difference in dimensions compared to permitted development, please.
Again, let me just, if you give me a moment, I'm going to call up the exact plans from our system, so just bear with me on that. So as you can see here, the longer section of this. Sorry, that's strange. There we go. So this is the longer section, which is 7 meters, as you can see, shown on the plan there. And this is the store area referred to, and the toilet and basin, and this is the open area. So this is actually the longer bit over here, but it includes obviously what's a partially open section here. So 7.6 metres on that side, 7 metres on this side here.
Councillor Whitehouse?
Yeah, but what I can't remember, I'm sorry, I should remember this, is what are the measurements required for permitted development beyond which you need planning permission?
So in terms of permitted development, you are allowed to go up to 50% of the garden, which includes the front, the back, and anything at the side. And if you are within 2 metres of the boundary, you are allowed for a flat roof to go up to 2.5 metres.
So it's the height of this which triggers requirement for planning permission rather than the sort of length of it is what I understand you to say. Is that correct?
It would have been, but the house is demolished now, so in my opinion there are no permitted development rights at the moment because there's no dwelling house.
And also, I believe, having spoken to the planning officer earlier on in the day, I think it's because it's 1 metre away from the boundary, this one, as opposed to the 2 metres away. So it's higher than would be permitted, and it's closer to the boundary than would be permitted.
Okay, Councillor Fair?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going somewhere along the same lines as Councillor Whitehouse here. While I agree that an outbuilding is a common feature of a garden, a construction that forms 2 sides of a square, which are about 23 feet long on either side, is much larger than most people would have in terms of a shed in their back garden. The height, as has been pointed out, is 3 metres, which is significantly above a 1.8 metre or even a 2 metre fence at the back. It has great proximity to the boundary of the gardens. From my point of view, I think this does have a significant impact on the neighbours, and as such I would not be supporting it.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Actually, I think the applicant should come back with something a little bit more modest than this, because I can't support it either.
Anybody else? Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted just to, there's 2 points I was going to make. First of all, condition number 6 seems to solidify that should this get planning this evening, that it can't be used for sort of overnight accommodation. I just wanted to check that that is in its strongest form and there's no other conditions that could be added by this committee to make sure that it's not used for any overnight stay or to be a separate dwelling in the future. It seems very robust, but I just wanted to check that. And the other point I just wanted to make is I think we do see now this being a very common thing for young families to want in their gardens. I personally don't object to anybody wanting such a desirable garden asset. It's very popular and it's encouraging that people want their children to play in the gardens. It's what we should want our children to do. So I have no issue with the development in that regard. With regards to the neighbouring properties, I wondered if planning officer could just put onto the screen. I can see from our report that there are outbuildings all very much in this part of, when you view the properties from a bird's eye view, there is, the neighbours do have outbuildings. They all seem to be in that location of their gardens. I don't know if there's a particular reason for that, if it's a good place for sun, I'm not sure. But I just wanted some explanation as to how this, if this is, I'm not familiar with these gardens obviously, but if this outbuilding is so detrimental to other people's gardens, why there are, what the other neighbouring outbuildings, what makes them so different? Are they just significantly shorter? But also more to the point, how would this outbuilding be any different to the larger residential properties in terms of sunlight and amenity? I just wanted to understand how an outbuilding can be so detrimental, but the vast amount of residential houses are somehow not detrimental to people's sunlight in their gardens. I just wanted to understand that because I don't see the logic myself.
Andrew.
I can show members the aerial photograph, which will show some of the outbuildings. Obviously, I won't be able to comment about how people experience outbuildings in their own gardens on sites that we've not visited. But if I call up the aerial photograph, you might be able to make an assessment. It also shows some of the shadows from trees, which will hopefully also be helpful to you. Because I'm not doing a presentation, I can't have the red dot, but there, this is the application site over here. And you'll see that there are some small outbuildings sort of dotted around, and then these shadows that you see are from larger trees that clearly show, the path of the sun, like I showed earlier.
Councillor McIver.
Thank you. If you could just go back to that screen, sorry, if that's technically possible. I just wanted to, and it's also raised another point, I guess now, there's obviously some very large trees, and I can see they have huge shadows in people's gardens. Are those trees that can't be chopped down? Because I would assume that the neighbours that are against this proposal would obviously be very concerned about the shade caused by those trees. And so are those trees that can't ever be removed if some of the objecting neighbours have that much shade in their garden from the trees? And also the outbuildings that I can see, that I think you understand my point, they seem to be in a bit of a cluster. In comparison to the 3 metres height of this outbuilding, how tall are those buildings? Do we have any information on that? They look more like sheds than summer houses, but compared with this, which is a more significant development, I understand that, but I just wondered how they would compare.
No, unfortunately, we don't have that information, but clearly if they were built under permitted development, then they would need to be below a certain height, although the permitted development right heights changed over the years, so you could, in sort of the early and mid-90s, build higher buildings on the boundary than you can now. So the short answer is I don't know how high how tall those buildings are. And the trees, it's not conservation area, so the trees are not automatically protected. So if they've got tree protection orders on them, they would be, but I can't tell you whether they've got TPOs on them either. I mean, I've got a map that I could call up to have a look, but that will take me about 5 or 6 minutes.
I wouldn't want to take up that much time on the committee's time, but obviously if any of the trees did have TPOs, then I understand why they remain. But of course, if neighbours are concerned about shade in their garden, if they had the option to remove the trees and choose not to, and I don't recommend removing trees either, but I just wanted to have some clarity on if shade is I can see there's lots of people that have objected, so if shade is this big an issue, is it going to be made worse by having this site and also the trees, or is it people's choice?
My colleagues who's on the call feeding me information says there aren't any tree protection orders in place in this section over here. They are to the front, so these larger trees over here are not protected. In terms of shade, I'm sorry, the only comment I can make is that sunlight and daylight into gardens is not something that we protect in terms of our policies.
Councillor Whitehouse.
I mean, I think the trees are a slightly side issue, but it's supposed to be helpful. Some of those trees are street trees, and the practice is quite often not to put TPOs on street trees because they're managed by the council, which is expected to manage them in a way that protects them, and so it's felt they don't need TPOs as well. Obviously, that doesn't apply to trees on private land, but that certainly applies to some of those along Faden Place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to come back in a couple of parts. Firstly, Councillor McIver's comment about protecting against being used for something other than the incidental amenity. Interestingly, later on in the agenda, there's a particular building where we did exactly that. It's now coming forward for an application to be as an independent building. So Is it well protected? I shall wait until the next one before I make my comments on that one. And I hate to disagree with Mr. Marks, but unfortunately, when you actually refer to policy DM9, section H, part 1, the Council will expect proposals to provide adequate sunlight, daylight and open aspects to all parts of the development and adjacent buildings and land, including private amenity space. So I think we do actually have a policy that does cover sunlight to land.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. Could Mr Marks just confirm, because I'm getting a little bit confused, on page 75, there's 2 sets of dimensions, and I understand that the outbuilding itself is L-shaped, with part of it supported as a flat structure projecting out on the long part, and the other part, the main building itself, is, if I've read this right, it's 7 metres in width, which includes that internal area, 3.8 metres, which is just over 3.5 metres in depth, and 3 metres in overall height. So the question is, what would be, if you were building that in a garden 1 metre, what would be your permitted height that you could go to without the planning permission? Is it 2.9 metres or is it 2.5? Somewhere around there?
For a flat roof building within 2 metres, it would be 2.5 metres high.
So,
Councillor Brady, please.
thank you. Could I just ask the planning officer, I think I was correct in hearing that you said that if we were minded to pass this, that beforehand we could add on, it must not be built until after the house has been built. Did we have to put that on as another rule?
You don't have to put that on, but I would suggest that what you wouldn't want is a building site with an outbuilding, possibly for a period of time, with no house attached to it. I mean, to make it slightly more complicated, the new dwelling that we did approve did actually have its permitted development rights removed as well. So at the moment, there is no permitted development rights on that site, so anything would require planning permission.
Okay, thank you. So are you proposing that we should have an amendment, a condition which says...
So I think I'm proposing that this shed, if we are minded to pass it tonight, must not be built until after the house has been built.
Do we have a second for that? Would we like to vote on that proposal, that the cannot be built until the main house is built?
Chairman, so sorry, can I make a point first of all? I'm sorry, when I started this, I wasn't aware of the applicant's name, and it is, or the ownership, and I do realise that I do know him and have represented him on several occasions at planning matters, so I shall leave the chamber. I should have declared early on, but I just didn't notice it. Okay,
accepted.
Thank you.
So I think we include that condition. Or did we not? Did we vote for it? We did.
Just need to confirm that you want to put that condition on as those in favour to include. 9.
Right, so that's the condition. Do we have any other person who would like to say anything at all on this? So we go to a vote. Those in favour of granting the application as recommended, please vote.
It's 5, Chairman.
And those against?
8, Chairman.
Abstaining?
It's 1, Chairman.
Okay, so that application has been refused. Therefore, we need to have
Chairman, it hasn't been refused, it's not been granted.
Not been granted.
Given that situation, perhaps can I propose refusal? on the basis of policy DM9, section H on privacy and amenity of neighbours.
Okay. You happy with that? Good. Second of that, please. Can we have a vote then on the rejection of the application? Those in favour?
8, Chairman.
Thank you. Those against?
It's 2, Chairman.
Abstaining?
It's 3, Chairman.
In which case, that application has been refused. Thank you.
The reasons for refusal, please.
Yes, Mr. Phillip, Councillor Phillip has just given them.
Councillor Morgan, I said because it's contrary to the policy that I referenced, which is DM9, subsection H, privacy and amenity of neighbours.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. Yeah, can do. Chairman.
Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just conscious that this is obviously, the house has not been built yet on this site, and that no doubt I assume the applicant will want to have some sort of outdoor building at some point in the future. In order to not waste this committee's time should a proposal come in the future, would the committee be mindful to give a way forward to make sure that if the application does come back in the future that there is something that we would deem acceptable? I just think as we spent so much time discussing it, it would make sense for committee time.
Firstly, I'm not sure about that, but sorry.
No, I mean, they can just go through what's permitted.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, they can just go through what's permitted, as Councillor Brazier said, but I'm not in favour of that. To look for a way forward. It could be taken in the wrong way. That's my own opinion. Anybody else have a view on that? Councillor Phillip.
Chairman, I think it is within the control of the committee to suggest a way forward. I think from the discussions that we've had, it's the size and proximity to the boundary that have been an issue. And if it was closer to what's allowed under permitted development rights, particularly once the house is built, that would certainly be much more tractable to the committee, I would think. I don't want to prejudge what other people think, but that might well be a way forward.
So you're suggesting within permitted development it goes forward? Councillor Whitehouse.
If it was within a particular development, it wouldn't need to come to the committee, Chairman. No, I mean, there's always a way forward, isn't there, with most things, which is, to address the reasons for refusal, which essentially, in this case, are the height and the bulk. And, I'm sure it's possible, to come back with something that's not so much different, which meets the concerns the committee has expressed. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very rare there's absolutely nothing that can be done. But if it was permitted development, it wouldn't need to be here in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Are we finished with that? I think we have. So the next item then is 12, which is EPF 077022. Oh, that's Hemel Street. Is EPF 128922, 41 Dukes Avenue, Thaden Boys, with an officer's recommendation to approve. And that is yourself, Andrew?
This one is a remote presentation by Mohammed Rahman.
Thank you, Chair. Item 12 relates to 41 Dukes Avenue, Thaden Boys. The proposal consists of two elements. One is to demolish the extensions to the host house, number 41, and the second element is to construct a 3-bedroom detached dwelling. Now, this application is before members due to objections from the local parish and local residents. Turning to the slides, over here we have the site plan. As you can see, the site is outlined in red over here. Here are the existing floor plans. So ground floor to the left and first floor on the right. Here are the proposed floor plans. So on the left hand side, we have the ground floor plan. So this is the ground floor plan for the proposed dwelling. And this is the ground floor plan for the host house, post demolition of the extensions. And here are the first floor plans for the proposed dwelling and the host house. So here are the existing elevations for the host house, number 41, and it's proposed to demolish these sections over here. And here are the proposed elevations. So over here is the proposed dwelling. And the host house. Now the proposed dwelling retains the key feature within Faden Boyce and the street, this cat slide roof with this diamond window, as you can see over here. So it tries to mirror it. Here's an existing and proposed street scene plan. So existing at the top and proposed at the bottom. Here's an aerial view of the application site. That's the front elevation. And this is from the rear. Just to summarize the merits of the proposal. So one, it's of an acceptable design and it relates positively to the locality and it would provide a good standard of accommodation for the future users of the proposed dwelling and the existing occupiers of the host house. There's adequate parking provision for both the host house and the proposed. And this application is recommended for conditional planning permission as set out within the agenda. And that's the end of the presentation. Over to members. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have 3 speakers on this. First one is the objector, Miss Elizabeth Byrne.
Thank you very much. Good evening, councillors. I'm making this representation this evening in a personal capacity since my family and I are the adjoining neighbours to 41 Dukes Avenue. That property, which sits on a corner plot, was extended in 2012 after several applications and the dismissal of an appeal. The existing 2-storey side extension is of a subservient size and scale and was designed to match that of numbers 38 and 44 Dukes Avenue opposite, being a style of extension which is reflected in that of a number of chalet-style properties. The predominant pattern of development is of 2-storey semi-detached properties, particularly on corner plots. The original detached property at number 39 was extended in 2017 to produce a pair of matching semi-detached dwellings, but the current proposal would appear as something of an oddity and recognisable as a more cramped form of development. However, we're also mindful that an earlier proposal in 2020 for an infill building to the rear of the site was refused in that year, and according to the pre-application advice now given, the current proposal is said to have been put forward to address the reasons for that refusal. As a background to this, our neighbour had approached me in January of 2020 wanting to purchase part of our garden to build a house in. The garden is no more than 75 feet long, as with the majority in the vicinity, and our property has not been extended to the rear, as many others have. Having been our family home for over 50 years, there is no money that could compensate for such an obvious loss of amenity to ourselves or to any future occupants, and I strongly declined. During lockdown, however, an application was submitted for a new dwelling immediately adjacent to our party fence, which, given that the land also rises up to the rear and is on our south side, would not only have resulted in a building that would have been highly conspicuous from the windows on the ground floor of our property, but would also have cast shade over half the garden from midday onwards for most of the afternoon. That application, as mentioned, was refused. I am particularly mindful that such speculative developments, whatever reasoning is given for them, are often difficult to manage, and the subdivision of the site in the way previously described could have led to a number of other very poor proposals for backland developments, both in terms of the impact on their semi-detached neighbours and on the general quality of residential amenity, which was also one of the reasons for that earlier refusal. In conclusion, therefore, I would also just wish to draw on one other aspect with respect to the importance of the preservation of street trees. That's an early photograph, by the way. There's another one to the front there on the verge, and which both myself and the local tree warden raised in our correspondence. Whilst these are not shown on the plans, it is presently possible to park 4 vehicles to the front of the site, but in order to ensure that the local authority may assess any impact from the widening of the existing crossover, particularly to the front, after construction work, it would be necessary to add the same condition as that added to number 39 Dukes Avenue in 2016 to remove permitted development rights under Schedule 2, Part 2, Class B of the GPDO, as alluded to in the Parish Council's return. This would allow for full assessment in the future, which provisions simply intended for tree protection during building work, as we know from experience, regretfully do not. Thank you.
Now we have for Thame Boys Parish Council, Councillor Peter Gooch. 3 minutes, please, Peter.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. Just a few points to make. I'll be as brief as possible. The first one is just to mention that the planning officer is treating this as a revision to the previous application. The application, as you previously heard, was a bungalow in the rear garden. This one is for a 3-bedroom house on the side of the property. So completely different matters come into play. So I was a little bit odd when I saw the planning officer treat it as a revision to the previous application. The glaring omission in the planning officer's report is, of course, the planning inspector's previous refusal of an application in 2012. At that time, the applicant applied for a very large 2-storey side extension up to the boundary, and actually if you study those plans, the footprint of this existing this proposed 3-bedroom is almost identical to the one which was previously proposed. We have mentioned in this report, but in case you haven't picked it up, I'll read what the planning inspector said. The appeal site is situated on a prominent open corner, which creates a visual gap in the built form. Its prominence is exacerbated when viewed down from raised Heath Drive. I consider this gap makes an important contribution to the overall character and appearance of the area. Further, that the open aspect of the corner location would unacceptably be eroded to the detriment of the character and the appearance of the surrounding area. The proposal would therefore have an adverse effect on the character and appearance of the surrounding area. Now, we've already heard in an earlier discussion this evening the importance of listening to planning inspectors' comments. The planning inspector would appear to have reviewed this from Dukes Avenue. He talks about the building line. He hasn't mentioned at all the aspect from Heath Drive. This is on a corner plot, and it's raised Heath Drive. So you come down, and this will be very, very prominent on this point. We think it's a cramped development. I would also just finally comment on the quality of the standard of the house. You saw the floor plans. This is about just over a metre away from the host house. You'll notice in the conditions that it's so close that the planning officer is proposing a condition to put obscure glass in the bedroom to prevent overlooking. The bathroom itself doesn't have any windows at all. So I'd question the quality. It's just further examples of this cramped development in what is an important open aspect, which obviously the previous planning inspector took account of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next one is Mr. John Britton, who's the applicant. 3 minutes, please.
Hi, evening. Sorry, I haven't got a big speech prepared, and I'm not the best at speaking out. The reason for the build is my son. We tried to get him, he's 21 years old now, I have 3 children, and the oldest being 21. We're trying to look for him to get a house set up for him, because he would need to move a lot further out for the budget he's got. So I'd like to keep him close to home, because he works for me, for my local building company. And if he goes to Clacton, where he's looking, it's just going to be too far for him to travel back. So building on the side of the house, I don't see it really. It's not upsetting anybody. It's not casting any shade on anyone's garden. Obviously, the point was raised between opposite us. There was a gap where you can see the fields. I know that house has just been sold opposite. I spoke to the new buyer who said he's going to extend right out over the side, so that gap will be gone. Because obviously the person next door to him's got the same extension, so he'll be allowed it. So that gap will be gone. The aspect from the street, I think it looks very nice in keeping on the corner. With regards to being very small and narrow, what more does a boy want? It's a 3-bedroom house. It gets him onto the property ladder, which you need to in this area, but you can't afford to. So I don't really want him moving away. So if I can keep him in the area and do this for him, I think it really makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. Who's speaking first? Mr. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. Dukes Avenue does, of course, have a variety of buildings, and a lot of them for personal taste. You may like them or you may dislike them. Unfortunately, I think this particular one looks like another little building squeezed in, and it will detract, I think, from the general appearance of the area. And I hear what has been said, but I'm afraid I couldn't support this, because I do not think it is in character with the rest of the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I remember this House. I remember the applications that we've had over time. I have talked to the applicant on a number of occasions when going around the village. I do completely sympathise with the desire to somewhere to have your children living close to you. My own daughter had to move all the way out to St Neots to find somewhere that she could afford. So I do completely sympathise with his desire to have somewhere for his son to live with him. However, I don't disagree with anything that my fellow ward councillor said. I do think that there is a lot in here that is a real problem. I'm very disappointed to see in the officer's report, if I had been in this area over the past couple of days, I would have actually been able to speak to the officer beforehand. But I think it's completely unrealistic to have a planning history that just covers a previous application for a dwelling in the back garden and for the pre-app comment on this. This site actually has a fairly extensive planning history looking for the side 2-storey extension which was built, and also for the garage proposal. The side extension was a final decision made in 2012. So we've not had the side extension for very long. And if we're serious about looking at things around ecological sides, building an extension and then knocking it down and building a new place, that's not very green. However, I think Councillor Gooch brought up a couple of good points in terms of the previous application that was refused by the inspector, in terms of the impact on the openness of the area. It is on a very visible site. It will make a significant difference. We did refuse the original garage at the side that we can now see, which then came through as a permitted development decision. I don't see that this actually is a reasonable approach to actually take for this one. I don't think that it's something that we should be approving. Completely, as I said, understanding the desire of the homeowner for it, I don't think that we should be looking at something like this. It is definitely not high quality design in terms of the area that we're looking at. It doesn't fit in, it looks bad, it doesn't match the street scene at all, and I would actually be proposing refusal of this on the basis of policy DM9, the high quality design. If we get to that point, Chairman, I'm quite willing to go down into greater detail on that policy.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I completely understand the purpose, and speaking as a 24-year-old that's grown up in this area, I cannot count on, in fact, I don't know anyone that I went to school with who's a property owner that's been able to buy a property in this area, and I completely understand why people have to resort to measures like this, and it is wrong. People that grow up in Epping having to buy houses in Malden, Braintree, Harlow, Clacton, Suffolk, Kent, it is absurd that we are in this position, but that's the position we're in, and that's the economics that this committee can't control. But what we can control is applications that our officers have input over. And I personally do disagree with the comments about the street scene. I actually think that small properties don't ruin a street scene. Not everybody can live in big houses, and not every street can have streets full of houses that are the same size. And I don't know Dukes Avenue as well as the ward colleagues, but I personally don't think there's any detriment to the street scene. And I particularly note its position on the street, it's on the end. If anything, I think it could even enhance it because it adds character, and that's my judgment on that. So I am of the opinion that this is acceptable, and so are the officers, so I will be supporting the application.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other comments from anybody? In which case, Councillor Phillip, will we be raising the motion to refuse?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, if I have a seconder, I would like to propose the refusal on the pieces of policy DM9. I don't believe this is a development that relates positively to its context, as we heard from the appeal inspector who had a view of what was there. I certainly don't think it makes a positive contribution to the place. It's also, in terms of the design standards, it's supposed to have relating positively to the form scale prevailing around the site, which this doesn't. And also in D4, it's the rhythm of any neighbouring or local regular plot and building widths. Again, this doesn't. I do understand what Councillor McIver says. I don't object to small houses either, but I think they have to be in the right place, and I firmly believe that for Thaden Boyce, this is not the right place.
Thank you. In which case, Councillor Amos. Sorry, Pedro.
Oh, Councillor McCready on Zoom.
Who's that? Councillor McCready. Thank you. Can't hear you.
I was starting to take this a little bit personally tonight, but I might have missed something. But I just make reference to page 81, where we're talking about the street trees. I don't know whether the issue with that, if this application does go through, has been addressed. Thank you.
Andrew?
I can come in here if required. We have added a tree protection condition. If permission is granted, the applicant would need to submit further details in terms of how they're going to protect the trees during the construction phase.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Right, do we have a seconder then for Councillor Phillips' motion?
Councillor Amos seconded.
Councillor Amos, you've already seconded.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. You have seconded, right. In which case, do we have can we vote for Councillor Phillips' motion to refuse the application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Chairman.
Those against the motion?
7, Chairman.
And those abstaining?
No, that would be it.
That's it. Okay, in which case the motion is carried. And for the reasons given, that application is refused, correct? Okay, so what's happened now is 4 people have stood up, and you want to pass that to DDMC at the next committee meeting. Thank you.
Okay, one of the officers will probably be in touch with you to explain, because that means that it goes to a different committee, which is a parent committee for them to consider. It will go with the refusal, but the members here have decided that it goes to that parent committee, so it'll be considered again, and the planning officer will be in touch, and you'll get a chance to speak again on that item.
Thank you. Okay, so now we move on to item 13, which is 6 Willow Tree Close, which is EPF 1327/22, and we have a late speaker on this one by permission of the chairman. So firstly, if we move on to, is it Andrew again, Andrew? Andrew to lead us through this.
Thank you, Chairman. Like you said, this is the property at 6 Willow Tree Close in Abridge, and this is for a loft conversion with a dormer extension to the rear and some roof lights to the front. So this is the aerial photograph showing the location of the property and sort of two wider context maps, just to perhaps explain, people will understand where it is a little better if I say that this building down the bottom here is the back end of the Blue Boar in Abridge. So yeah, this row of houses sort of stands behind it, and it's part of the wider conservation area. This is the view to the rear. You will see that the roofscape is fairly consistent here, or at least no roof extensions. Roof extensions are not permitted development in conservation areas. These are the drawings showing the existing front and rear elevations. You'll see the 3 roof lights proposed there in the front elevation, and then the dormer to the rear. These are the floor plans on the right hand side. This is a closer view of the rear elevation, which is obviously the main concern for officers. You will see on the right hand side we've superimposed a previous planning application that was refused for a slightly larger dormer. So this application is actually for a slightly smaller dormer set back from the eaves, but only slightly, as you can see from the, hopefully from the purple outline there. Like I said, this property is located in a conservation area, and therefore the local planning authority must pay special attention to the desirability of preserving and enhancing the character and appearance of the area. Whilst we've not received any objections from members of the public regarding this application, officers, and specifically our conservation officer, whose comments was available to view on our website, do consider that the roof extension is a particularly unwelcome intervention in the roofscape due to its size and location, and planning permission is therefore recommended to be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We only have one speaker on this, which is lady down there. Your name is? You turn on your microphone.
Hello, Anita.
Okay.
Ready?
3 minutes.
Okay. I absolutely love my little house. I love my area, and I'm so grateful for the rural views that I have. I submitted my planning application for a loft conversion so I could create a master bedroom with a view across the field to create my dream home. I agree that in my first submission there was too much glass, but by reducing the size and changing the style of the glass, I hope that you'll consider it acceptable. The width and height of the dormer have remained the same. However, I've set the dormer even further back from the eaves and of the existing house and changed the angle of the slope as requested. After making these changes, I personally see no reason why this new proposal should be rejected, as there are clear examples of similar planning approvals within my small estate. The proposed doors are the same style which was approved at 16, which is this. The proposed dormer roof is 250 millimetres lower than what was approved at number 17, which is this. The approved dormer at number 17 is 630 millimetres wider than what I'm proposing, again this. and my dormer wall is set back 500 millimetres from the first floor wall, which is also more than what was approved at number 17. Despite these reductions and similarities to other approved planning, my application was still refused. This shows that there's no consistency within the planning department. Willow Tree Close is a modern development that was built in 2001. The houses have a cottage design, which is the main reason why I bought my house 4 years ago. My intentions are to make the dormer look as much as it is a part of the original development as possible, and this is why I'm confused when I requested to make the dormer the same as existing material, which is render, and the conservation officer has suggested that it should be lead or tile. I've been through every application that has ever been submitted for Willow Tree Close, and on all of them the conditions state use existing material. So why is it different for me? The dormer window should be no wider than the windows immediately below, but sorry, that's another thing that was stated, that they should be no wider than the windows immediately below. But once again, this was something that was approved at number 17. It makes no sense. There were also 2 key differences noted on the report comparing my house at number 6 with the approved house at number 17. She's correct in saying that I am a terrace house and they are an end of terrace. She's also correct in saying that the neighbours directly to the left have already incorporated multiple gable end features. I would just like to point out that number 16 is a rear 2-storey extension on a 3-bedroom house, and the gable end design is a new feature built in 2015. My row of houses back onto a field which is privately owned property with cows on it, so I'm sure a site visit has not been carried out, but I feel that if there had been, then there would not be an issue approving this dormer.
Excuse me, can you wind up, please? Can you wind up, please? You've had your 3 minutes.
Oh, sorry. There have been no objections raised from any of my neighbours or the Lambourne parish, so I hope that you find this application acceptable.
Thank you. No other speakers, so Councillor Rolfe, I believe.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You will note that I called this in. The applicant is a member of, resident of my ward, and I really had no option when she approached me, because in desperation at one stage a few months back, because she was getting nowhere, and I thought that I would try and get contact with the planning officer and try and sort out these matters that she's just mentioned, and without going over the same ground again. But I'm sorry, but I have to say this, I've had no joy. The only time I've had any reply from the planning officer concerned was when I called it in, and I did, because I said I want an acknowledgement, and they did. It was acknowledged, and you've seen the result there. But this could have been resolved, and in fact, if you don't really, you may feel that we need a site visit, because one of the main question I have asked repeatedly is, have you seen the site itself? Have you been out? This is or to speak to the officer. Now, I'm not saying that the officer's at fault, but the point is, without a reply, it's impossible, and it's not the first time this is happening now. We haven't got, I was hoping that the officer was here tonight, but again, it's not to be, it's not on the screen either, and I just feel that we're not doing the duty by our residents correctly when we put up with this sort of nonsense, because we're entitled to ask a simple question and through the correct channels, and I thought I was done it the right way, but no. I'm sorry, so I'm now asking, I would have mentioned it before, but I wanted the chance to speak tonight, which I wouldn't have got if I mentioned a site visit. I don't know, and neither does as far as I'm aware, the applicant knows whether there has been a site visit by an officer, or has anybody looked at it apart from, well, myself and her. I mean, you have to look back on the case that was thrown out last year, the objections. They have met the criteria concerned, in my opinion, but the point is, all it requires is a simple answer. We can't argue against it or for it if we don't know whether can't get an answer to a simple question. So I'm sorry, I'm supportive of what's going on here. And I hope that my colleagues will support this, even if it could be resolved now, perhaps with a site visit. But I've just given up on with the officer concerned by not getting a reply. However courteous you can be. In fact, I'm beginning to think that sometimes it's no good being courteous and asking a simple question on the phone as arranged, because you don't get an answer.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I know that James is off sick tonight, otherwise he would have been here, but that leaves Andrew to any comments that you're aware of on this one. Difficult.
Thank you, Chair. If you remember in the presentation, you would have seen the photograph that was taken from the rear, and clearly our officers have had a previous interaction with this, including from our conservation officer. So I apologise if there were interactions that went unanswered, and we can investigate that for you. What I would say, though, is we have an extensive pre-application and post-application service that we advertise on our website, and that is the correct channel for people to engage with us if they want to discuss with us amended proposals after a refusal of planning application.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if that helps you, Councillor Rolfe. Not particularly. No. Okay.
It is happening. It's too glib all the time. These sort of one-liner rejections without proper discussion, and I think enough's enough.
Okay.
I hope I get some cooperation, some
Councillor Kyver.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully understand the purpose behind the applicant's decision to seek planning for this development, because knowing Abridge very well as it falls in my county division, the views behind are absolutely exceptional, and I saw them myself, and I can totally understand the reason for wanting to do this. And if there is a precedent already, I just would like, if the planning officer is able just to clarify, not that I disbelieve the applicant, but for the committee's benefit, if the applications mentioned by the applicant are to be the case, and there is a precedent, and if anything this application is slightly smaller, although different in nature but smaller, then I don't see, if there are no neighbours objecting, and if the parish council haven't objected, and this application has previously been to a committee, been refused, and the reasons for refusal have been dealt with a second application. So I personally can't see a reason why I wouldn't want to be able to support it, but I would like clarity on whether there is a precedent already here.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we discuss precedent quite often at these committee meetings, and the advice that officers always give is that clearly each application has to be assessed on its own merits. Like I showed in the drawing, the current proposal is only marginally, in our opinion, smaller than the previous refusal, and in the opinion of our conservation officer, did not address the previous concerns. Regarding precedent specifically in relation to number 17, I can perhaps just read to you what the conservation officer said in their very detailed comment. It says, the example of similar works to nearby number 17 Willow Tree Close differs in two key considerations. In design, with the loft conversion in the form of a gable end, essentially forming an extension to the roof and incorporating materials to match the existing, as well as secondly the setting, with the site being an end terrace and its neighbouring dwelling already incorporating multiple gabled roof elements. So in the opinion of the conservation officer, the works at number 17 does not set a general precedent. Also in terms of the conservation officer's comments, there are some clues in there about what we may consider more acceptable at the site, which is smaller dormers of a specific design, which the applicant did mention. So we have given some clues in the conservation officer's comments about what may be more acceptable, which is already possibly perhaps more than we usually do.
Thank you, Andrew. Any more comments on that, Councillor?
Yes, Chairman. Well, as far as I understand it, the reason that this was recommended for refusal is really because it's in a conservation area. Apparently, it's very, very strict planning controls in a conservation area. That's why we have conservation areas. And the planning officer, I gather, felt that this was very, very overbearing and completely different to the rest of the line of houses. So I think that is the reason why. And then the rest of you will have to make up your minds what you think.
Councillor Woodbury.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Like Councillor McIver and Councillor Rolfe, I know this area well, and I know the location and the viewpoint of the location well. Obviously, if you reduce the size of the dormer too much, the point of a loft conversion is pointless. Because actually you just don't get the roof space to create a room that would be usable. And so I'm with Councillor Rolfe and Councillor McIver on this one. I think probably where we're heading to is the need for a site visit to see whether or not the conservation area outweighs the actual loft conversion application. I've seen many loft conversions in my time, and if they're done in the right way, they can be a real asset to the location, as well as being a detriment if they're done badly. So I think, bearing in mind this is a conservation area, bearing in mind I don't believe it's an overly big request for a loft conversion, I would actually like to see the location for ourselves and bring it back to the next planning committee for decision.
Okay. Right, Councillor Macready.
Thank you, Chairman. We've heard a little bit tonight about precedents, but this worries me because we are not supposed to be looking at precedents. We are looking at every application on its own merit. But referring to page 92, regarding this application, Lambourne Parish Council, no objection. Site notice displayed, an application advertised 20th July 2022. Neighbours consulted, 6, no objection. I'm not really convinced that this should have actually been brought back to council, that it should and it should be up for refusal. I'm not very happy about this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Phillip, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually second Councillor Whitbread's proposal for a site visit. I think it's also very important that if we do that site visit, we actually look at 17 Willow Tree Close as well, so we can actually get a proper view of what the two things being referred to are and see if there are similarities or differences. I do have to disagree with Councillor Macready. I think, as Councillor Brady said, the fact that it's in a conservation area is a very significant and weighty addition to what we're looking at. But if we can look at this site and at the site also being referred to, I think that will give us a much better view about whether what's being asked for fits in with what's around there within the conservation area, whether it's something that if it was significantly smaller, whereas Councillor Whitbread said, make a loft conversion useless, and see whether we've got the right balance here. And I think actually seeing it in the flesh is going to be one of those ones which is really useful at the moment.
Thank you. So, okay. So we have a proposal. Councillor Bedford.
I actually agree with Councillor Phillip, but I seem to remember at the beginning there was a discussion, it was mentioned what year these houses were built. Do we know that? 92. So they're not that old, but they are within the conservation area. Sorry, 2001.
Okay, so the proposal for a site visit was Councillor Whitbread, seconded by Councillor Phillip. All those in favour, please vote.
Unanimous, Chair.
Okay.
No, apologies.
Those against?
Just one.
Okay. Fine. Okay, so we have a site visit to be arranged on that, Andrew, as soon as possible. Convenient. Okay. Okay, we're on to item 14 now, planning application EPF 1505/22, London Alpacas in Thaden Mount. And that is for approval. Is that you, Andrew? Good.
Thank you, Chairman. We're almost there. I think this is our second last item. Like you said, this is an application from the site is called London Alpacas in Mount Road in Thaden Mount in Epping. So the land is currently in agricultural use for breeding of alpacas, and the application is to facilitate educational visits by members of the public. So this is the application site over here. You'll see it's a bit of isolated field with a very long access road over here. There is a house standing over here, so the access is through this long unpaved road to the field over here. These are some photographs of the site. This is the access road down here. Officers have been informed that the caravan station over there is used to provide respite in instances of inclement weather. This is an aerial photograph showing the site. I believe it's around 1 hectare in size, which obviously excludes the access track. So just while I leave that up there, just to give you a bit of background, this started off as an investigation, and the applicant then decided to apply for a certificate of lawfulness, because I think there was a slight disagreement about whether the use was lawful or not. There was an appeal, and the appeal was dismissed, which then resulted in this application. Just to be clear, the inspector, I believe, found that the alpacas on the site, the 15 alpacas, that's being bred with, and the production of fleece and fleece product, that was considered to be an agricultural use. So actually this application only relates to visiting members of the public. We've had a number of objections around the access point, also parking issues, and it was reported that members of the public had parked at the top of the lane, causing difficulty for road users. The solution that has been brought forward by the applicant is that the number of visitors is to be limited to one group of up to 6 people per day, and then there will be arrangements made for fetching people from a remote location, so no parking on the site. My understanding is that the owner of the house at the top of the lane has control over the land, so we'll be able to take action if people park there without the proper authorization. I just also want to then mention, perhaps I'll point out on page 100, the case officer suggests that members should focus on the specific visits for educational and recreational purpose, so not the alpacas being there on site or the alpacas activity. The scale of the proposal is modest, and as you'll see, we've only got one condition proposed there, which is to limit the educational visits to one group of visitors not exceeding 6 people on any day, and there's some hours that we tie down there. So the recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to that condition. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Again, we have 3 speakers on this. First one is Mr. Paul MacDonald, who's objector via Zoom. Thank you. 3 minutes, please. So we can't hear you.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Apologies for not being there in person, but I'm on a business trip in Mobile, Alabama in the United States. Otherwise, I would be there myself. My objection covers 3 areas. Basically, with regard to my privacy, security and well-being of my property and the other neighbours who own land adjacent to the proposed site. I was initially concerned by the map that was originally shown, which shows access to the site. That is actually my private property. All of the road and the track from Mount Road to the site is my land. And we have had incidents of people parking there illegally. and there's no way to control or monitor the number of people or the number of visits that have taken place. Luckily, we have very good neighbours in the area, and I get notifications of people illegally parking on my land while I'm at work. And I travel overseas for business, so it's very hard for me to keep a record of the number of people parking illegally without my permission on my land. We have had incidents of the electric gate, which is there for security because we are in a remote area, being forced open and left open and damaged, which concerns me about the security of my property, the other landholders and neighbours, and the property they have on the land. And that is the main reason for my objection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have Mr. Peter Connell from Faden Mount Parish Council.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am the chairman of Faden Mount Parish Council. To my knowledge, it's the first time for many years that the Parish Council has been represented at a planning committee meeting. I think this reflects the depth of feeling in the area and the number of complaints which have been made direct to us as parish councillors. I think most of the people up in the public gallery are concerned residents of Faden Mount who want to know what goes on today. So I'm essentially here for two reasons. Firstly, to reflect the strong feeling of local residents, not only to the application but also to certain aspects of the current use of the property. And secondly, to respectfully challenge certain of the findings and recommendations by the officer in this case. Faden Mount is a parish with a relatively small population, but the parish is spread over a large area of well-preserved greenbelt rural land, including the application property, which itself is situated within historic parkland. Residents are anxious to protect the green belt from the gradual creep of inappropriate development. The area is ripe for such development in the sense that it is close to various metropolitan and built-up areas such as Harlow, Loughton, and of course Epping itself. The officer's report states that the rough patch is the only local address supporting the application. However, I think he's inappropriately or wrongly identified where the rough patch is. The rough patch is actually the woodland marked on a blue pointer, which I've seen on one of the plans supporting the application. The owners of the rough patch woodland have objected to this application, not supported it, because the application relates to adjacent land. The current owners of the woodland some years ago purchased the land to protect the area from inappropriate development and in particular to help protect the historic parkland next to it. I mentioned that various complaints have been made to councillors about the present use of and access to the site. Various residents in the area have been stopped and asked directions to the alpaca farm. These requests have always come from people trying to access the site by car. Indeed, the applicant's website states that the alpaca farm is only 4 minutes away from, 4 minutes drive from Epping Station, and we feel this is likely to encourage visitors with cars. Residents living close to the site have complained about the conditions in which the alpacas are kept and also overcrowding of the field. A close neighbour of the site, in addition to Paul MacDonald, who you've heard from, has complained that visitors' cars park and block the access from time to time already. The second element of the parish council's objection relates to statements contained in the officer's report. The officer rightly states that the applicant is unable to provide parking and that parking is not possible on the road. He also describes the additional elements of the application as low key. However, as I've already stated, parking, access, and the additional elements are already issues for local residents. The officer states that access from the highway is in the control of the landowner, but of course Paul MacDonald has already dealt with that point.
Excuse me, can you wind up, please?
So, certainly, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps the most telling point, in fact, though, is the conclusion given by the council's own officer to the previous application in respect to this site, which was for a certificate of lawful development. If I may, I'll just quickly read his conclusion, which I think is helpful here. He said, overall, the significant increase in visitor numbers to the site will cause further harm to the access track, have a detrimental effect on the peace and tranquility of the registered park and gardens, be of a significant nuisance to the occupiers of the dwelling known as the lodge, and pose a risk to highway safety, All this together would lead to the site having a significantly marked difference in character to that of the existing agricultural use of the site. And on the basis of the reasons presented, you're requested to dismiss this application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the next one is the applicant, Mr. Sander van Ostrot.
Cool. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members of the council, of the committee. First of all, I'd like to thank the planning officer for bringing forward the application with a recommendation for approval after he visited the site and he looked at how suited it is. I'd like to address some of the concerns that some of our neighbours have raised to the application. So first off, the neighbours highlighted that there's no hand wash facilities and that this could be of a concern. We've actually got an animal exhibition license issued by the Epping Forest District Council licensing department, and they've visited the farm, assessed the welfare of the animals, which has to be really high in order to get a license to exhibit them, and to assess our processes as well. Now, obviously, hand washing is covered by this, and we have hand washing facilities, but also the lady that visited from the licensing department was so impressed with the welfare that she issued us with a 3-year license, while normally a new applicant would only get a 1-year license. There's also concerns that the grazing could be seen as out of character, but of course in the area we've got lots of livestock being kept. There's horses, there's cattle, and I believe soon to be sheep, and of course the alpacas as well that have been there for many years living happily. Then it's worth mentioning as well that 2 of our direct neighbours with the fields next to us have commented positively on our planning application. I believe one is with the address of the rough patch, and actually the land that we've purchased was also called the rough patch when we purchased it, and that's the same for our neighbour. So I think that's where the confusion may come from as to who left that comment, and both of these neighbours have animals as well. Then it's worth mentioning as well that there's benefit for other local businesses. We often recommend and even bring people to the Mary Fiddler pub just around the corner, and the majority of our visitors actually visit by public transport, and then they take a taxi, which often is a local taxi as well. Then just to briefly address the concerns around the access and the parking. So we always tell our visitors that they can only park if they drive down the dirt road. They've got to have a higher car, and it's got to be dry for several days for them to do so. If that's not the case, they will park elsewhere, Epping Forest, just behind the shops, for example, or at the station car park, somewhere where they're actually allowed to park, and then they get a taxi from there, or we pick them up as a courtesy. And then the access track itself, it is owned by Paul MacDonald, as he stated, but we have right of way over the access track for any purpose at any time, which was a covenant that was added when the land was split up. Then, yeah, just to wrap up, so I just want to say, we're very excited to hopefully keep sharing our passion of these animals with our visitors. Like we have an opportunity here to educate people about rural life and keeping animals, agriculture, and at the same time we're producing high quality and ethical products right here in Epping Forest. And you can get yarn, you can get a scarf that's made right here, and that really excites us. And it comes with unprecedented traceability right back to the animal that created that product. So we can sell a bit of yarn, people can come and visit the animal that created that yarn and assess for themselves if that welfare is something they're happy with, and if they'd like to purchase those products. And we believe that this is a way forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's the last speaker. Members. Do we have a member who's going to speak? Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask how long the alpacas have been there, and when was this licence granted? We probably won't know this in the planning department, but I wonder if Mr. Mark would know. Thank you.
In terms of how long they've been there, I'm not sure, but I remember an officer mentioning it maybe a year and a half or so ago. It may have been longer, but regarding the licensing, I'm sorry, I've got no information on that.
Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman.
just to say I'm very confused with the information that we're getting. All of it seems totally contradictory. Someone objects, then we're told someone doesn't object. Someone says the welfare's not good, then someone says the welfare's excellent. Someone says you can cross over the road, someone says you can't cross over the road. It is extremely difficult to make a decision when we've got such contradictory statements. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, agree with that. Councillor Philip, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've a number of concerns with this application, not least the number of increased movements that we have in proximity to Epping Forest. Given when we're looking at the pressure for residential development, the number of movements, even one movement was considered an issue on a particular appeal that we had. This is looking at a group every day, potentially during the week, six a day, potentially up to a number of people. That may well be more than one vehicle movement in each direction, given that they may not all come from the same place. That is a significant number of increased movements. We are trying to reduce the number of movements. We know that these movements will have to be off-site because there isn't anywhere to park. I do actually also have a concern about the stationing of the caravan in the green belt for storage, and whether that should be looked at by our enforcement people, because that is a concern. A caravan permanently stationed in the green belt is an issue, particularly if it's used for storage. Overall, I can't see a positive thing for this in terms of the planning aspects of it. And as such, I can't support this.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I think it's worth noting that this is obviously an exciting business, and we live in a rural area, a rural setting, so one can expect businesses like this to exist, and they do exist. However, I think it is very important to be mindful of infrastructure that is required to make these not only fit for purpose but sustainable long term, because anyone that starts a business in Epping Forest, I would hope they make a huge success of it, and they're really busy. I think of places like, extreme places like Paradise Wildlife Park just outside of this district, and I think of other farms within this district. They have every opportunity to be really successful. My concern would be, and the genuine passion from the applicant would prove that this probably would become a very successful venture, but then I could see there being problems down the line with issues with one of the objectors' ownership of the land, which I appreciate you have access to, but in practical terms, could there be difficulty enforcing parking with large amounts of visitors? Could there be issues of emergency services? I can foresee problems, and as a business person myself, I always look on the positives, but of course you have to be real about matters too. I also have concern about large volumes of traffic so close to the forest. We already have challenge in that remit. And I also know that Faden Mount, and indeed the Passingford Ward, is a very special part of our district in that it is so well preserved and the green belt is so well protected and has been done so for generations. And I would be concerned about a lapse of that record due to short-term emotion of the excitement of a clearly exciting business. So with that balance, I am convinced that there are enough reasons to, on this occasion, object to this application. I feel that I will be voting in that way, but that doesn't mean to say this business activity should cease, and I think there could be opportunity to make sustainable business here, but I think this particular proposal, and I have to say there's just a slight lack of information on my behalf on the future planning of the business proposal. I'm not here as an investor wanting to invest in a business. I'm here to judge the planning merits. But I think for this committee to be able to support something of this nature, some more information about the future would be useful. So on this particular occasion, I find myself unable to support the application.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Whitman.
Thank you, Chairman. This is one of those difficult applications because as a councillor in the local area, you're always willing new businesses to succeed and for educational facilities to be an asset to the area. But this application leaves a lot of questions unanswered, as we've heard from previous speakers, and needs addressing. I know the location relatively well, well, very well indeed, and the access to it worries me no end. I accept the access is not in itself a planning issue. However, it could become one very easily, particularly taking into account the comments made by Councillor Phillip with regards to vehicular movements in the locality and the issues we've had in our own local plan for that reason. So I believe those themselves are problematical. But my real concern with this is it just leaves so many unanswered questions. I really haven't got the information before me to make a rational decision about it. I am concerned by it. Nothing I've heard since and during the objections and presentation for it has allayed my fears. So I will not be supporting the application this evening. However, I do believe that if it was to come back again, we would need much more detail, and particularly around vehicle movements, and particularly around where people could park, because unfortunately, whilst well-meaning, not many people will park in Epping, get a taxi up to Faden Mount in order to go and see the alpacas, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to draw your attention to the usage, which is for the keeping of the alpacas, and more importantly, related activities, including production of fleece and fleece products. This is turning into a shop to sell a product with no facilities to enable that. And I am a bit worried that this will develop into an entirely different business with that intention, and I think that should be considered.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
Right, so it was interesting to hear what other people had to say. This is in my ward and it's in my parish, and what people may not be aware, this is part of the historic parkland that goes with Hill Hall, which is an Elizabethan Grade 2 listed building. So this is all meant to be preserved parkland. Now, parkland is used for the grazing of animals, which it always has been over the years. As the gentleman's pointed out, he's got horses to the left of him, horses to the right of him, cows down the road, sheep up the road, etc. We also had somebody many years ago in our parish who went in for goats, but the goats seemed to be a front for possibly something else. And there's lots of houses where he did have goats once upon a time. I would hate something like that to happen here. I'm not saying it would. I would just hate it, but it did start with the going on of a big caravan in the first place, and we've already got the big caravan there. We've had neighbours report to us that there are overnight stays in that caravan. So it's lovely to have alpacas. They're very sweet animals. It's really cute. I don't know if people are fully aware of the size of what 1 hectare is. It says here, under 2.5 acres. A really, really tiny amount. And the applicant himself says that even that less than 2.5 acres is subdivided into 2 parcels of land so that the animals are only grazed on 1 acre of land. I went down to look at those animals the other day because obviously I'm an animal person and I know how horses and other animals should be kept. I went down there, and on this 1 acre of land there were 12 alpacas. And in your written information here, the applicant says he is looking to have 15 animals on this tiny patch of land. And when I went to look, that little bit of land that they were grazing on had 3-foot-high thistles on it. So I'm not quite sure about how well they're being looked after. So I looked up on the British Alpaca Society and their recommended number of animals per acre, because we recommend with horses, every horse or pony should have 2 acres to 1 horse, so I thought alpacas were a bit smaller. And their recommendation from that society is 5 to 6 alpacas per acre. So we've got 12 there now. We're supposedly having 15. So I would just question about, you know, but I don't know enough about alpacas to go any further down that route. But we're looking at access here. You've heard that Mr. MacDonald has zoomed in from America because he's so concerned. The setup is he lives in what's called the Old Lodge or the Lodge House. So the entrance, literally, that was the old entrance to Hill Hall, it goes through his front garden. So you've got this electric gate, which he has there. It goes through his front garden, and every person that visits there has to go through his front garden, which is not ideal for a commercial concern. So what we've got at the moment there is we've got individual people that keep horses there and just come up to ride their own horse occasionally. It's not commercial concern. We're quite happy that this gentleman has his alpacas there, although, you know, we're quite happy with that. But to say that it's for educational visits is a little misleading, I think. Again, it sounds good, doesn't it? Educational visits, that sounds a really good idea. But I looked up on the London Alpaca site how much it would cost me for one of these educational visits, and it's £80. So it may be educational as well, but it's really quite commercial. It did explain that that was for up to 4 people, so it's not necessarily £80 each. It's not going to be 80, but it said it's not worth their while to do it for less than that amount. So even if there was only one of you, it said on the site that's what it would cost. So please don't be misled. You can be educated at the same time, I'm sure, but it's obviously a very commercial concern. So all these things make me rather worried, and I'm particularly worried about the caravan being there. So I would ask, perhaps, that if people are minded to pass this tonight, that we add another clause and another condition requesting that the caravan should only be used in association with the alpacas, and if at any point the alpacas go or whatever, the caravan is removed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Are you putting forward a motion, should this be passed, that the caravan be only used for
Yes,
alpaca-based conditions and not residential?
Yeah.
Does anybody second that? We have a second over there.
Chairman, while I understand Councillor Bree's concern, I actually think that the positioning and stationing of the caravan is a larger aspect and should actually be looked at from an overall planning point of view. As I already suggested, perhaps we need enforcement to look at it, see whether it is valid for it to be there at all. There's nothing in this application that's requesting the presence of the caravan, so I suspect it's out with the constraints of this particular application. I think perhaps the right way, given what I've heard from members here, is actually to propose refusal of this application on the grounds of the traffic impact and the impact on the immunity of the neighbours, particularly the gentleman who the access is through, on the basis that not enough information has been given around that. And I won't touch on the business case, because the idea of £80 for a visit for 2 hours, I don't see how that's actually going to make money, but that's not a planning issue at this stage. But so I would propose refusal if I have a seconder.
Do we have a seconder? We do. So, gentlemen and ladies, can we have a vote on Mr. Phillips' proposal to refuse the application? Those in favour?
It's 14, Chairman.
Against?
Against. 1.
And you also mentioned about passing this on to the caravan aspect, passing on to enforcement. Can you make
Apologies.
a note of that, please?
Yeah, apologies, Chair. We do need a reason for refusal as
Reason
well.
for refusal.
Chairman, I thought I gave a couple of reasons. One was the traffic impact and the other was to do with the impact on the immunity of neighbours.
And then do members also want to add the reason for lack of information, because that could be a reason for refusal as well?
If that is a valid reason for refusal, then yes, I think there was definitely a feeling from the committee that there wasn't enough information there.
Yeah, correct.
That should probably be...
So,
sorry, Chairman, if, just from my successor in planning for Full Hill, the impact on the special area of conservation.
Okay. Right.
Yes,
Do you want to say something, Nigel? Okay. Okay, so that application has been refused, yes? Thank you. Right, on to our very last one then, item 15, which is Mickleham, Faden Road, Faden Boys.
The last one will be a remote presentation by Mohammed Rahman.
Thank you, Chair. So item 15 relates to Mickleham in Faden Boys. The proposal is to separate the function of the existing building from an ancillary residential use to a primary residential use. Now, this application is before members due to a sole objection from the local parish. There's been no objection from local residents. There has been a letter of support from the neighbour opposite. Turning to the slides. Here we have the location plan. So outlined in blue is the donor site, Mickleham. And the proposed site is outlined in red over here. And here's the existing building. Here's a closer view of the site plan. So on the left-hand side is the existing site plan, and on the right-hand side, the proposed. There's no external or internal changes proposed. The only difference in physical terms is an EV charging point would be located over here, a cycle store over here, and refuge storage over here. Those are the only physical changes. And here are the elevations, and as mentioned before, there's no change to the external elevations. Here's an aerial view of the application site over here. So there's a new boundary proposed right over here where my cursor, laser pointer is. And there has a condition has been added seeking further details of this boundary treatment, which would separate the donor site from the application site. Here are images of the existing building. So photograph 2 is the view from the street. Number 3 is the view of the parking spaces. And 4 and 5 of the rear of the application site. And number 6 is the view towards the donor site. And over here is where the proposed boundary treatment would be to separate the application site from the donor site. Just to summarize the merits of the scheme, so there's no harmful impact to the green belt or neighboring amenities. There would be a good level of accommodation for future users of this building. And there are no highway safety impacts. And on those grounds, officers are recommending conditional planning permission. Thank you. Over to members.
Thank you. So we have 2 speakers on this one. The first one is Faden Boys Parish Council, Councillor Peter Gooch. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you again, Chairman. Well, this is all about planning principle, isn't it? and whether this council is serious about conditions or not. This building was a garage. It was given planning permission for a replacement, a garden room stroke annex. It was given permission as a playroom for the children and for the use of the nanny when she was present. It was strictly conditioned. The proposed development shall only be used as ancillary accommodation for the existing dwelling house and shall not be occupied as a unit separately from the dwelling presently known as Mickelman. The reason: the site is situated in the Metropolitan Greenbelt where the creation of new residential units is not permitted. What message does this send out if you're suddenly saying, okay, you don't need to apply to conditions, EFCC will overturn it. And also, all annexes are now up for grabs to be converted into bungalows. I think you need to think about this one carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person is the agent, Aaron Breeden. Aaron Breeden, can you turn your microphone on?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, councillors. This application seeks to change the use of residential annex to a separate residential dwelling. The proposal would enable the applicant to downsize from the main house to remain in the local area they currently live and enjoy. The neighbours support the proposal and there are no neighbour objections. The proposal does not alter the appearance of the building and the land. The building, garden and parking remains the same as existing. Neighbour amenity is maintained. The proposal has no detrimental effect upon neighbours and the street scene. The principal change is simply for the installation of a native hedgerow to separate the garden of the proposal from Mickelham and the installation of a cycle store and bin store. The proposal does not affect the openness of the Greenbelt, and as such, the reuse of a building comprising of permanent and substantial construction, which this is, falls within appropriate development within the Greenbelt under paragraph 150 of the NPPF and the policies contained within the draft local plan submission version. Due to the sympathetic nature of the proposal, the verdant character of the locality is maintained. Existing landscaping is retained. Essex County Council Highways has found the proposal to be acceptable. The applicant has submitted a habitats regulation assessment and agrees to enter into SAC mitigation measures via the Section 106 agreement. The proposal is very minor and we look forward to your support to enable this application to come forwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to take issue with the applicant's agent. It's not a minor thing. Effectively, what we're looking at here is a new residential development within the Greenbelt. I remember with great detail it coming to Planning Committee back in 2013 for this annex and the pleading that was done because it needed to be there to provide the nanny with facilities. It's interesting to see that the applicant has used the same agent as he did when he was asking for the annex. And the conclusion of the design access statement from Clear Architects back in that point said, it's been demonstrated within this statement how the proposed annex would be used and it would not be a separate residential entity. Duly, the council could reasonably place a condition on the approval, ensuring that the annex is at all times used in conjunction with the main house only. To revert from that to then saying it's a building that can then be reused, given that this is less than 10 years since the annex was granted permission, we are looking at effectively a backdoor access to get a new residential development within the Greenbelt. We protect the Greenbelt and we protect it significantly. I completely understand the need to downsize. That's not always the case. And in fact, if you look at the occupant, the resident of Great Gregory's house, who's got the house up for sale at the moment, who's the one who has supported this application, I suspect they're looking to downsize as well, but looking to move away rather than construct an annex in their back garden, keep it for a few years and then say, well, it's a building to be reused. I think this is trying to drive a coach and horses through Greenbelt policy. It does, as a separate residential building, create greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt because there is additional work there. This was an annex that was subordinate to the main residential building. It didn't generate by itself additional vehicle movements. It will as this. I can't see any reason why we should throw our Greenbelt policies out the window and say this is something that we want to support. And I'm completely against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully concur with Councillor Phillip. When I first saw this application, I thought, well, the building's there, what harm has it done? Then I learned about, because I wasn't on the council at the time, I learned about the conditions that had been applied originally. And quite frankly, if this council is to have any standing at all, and we impose conditions, we've got to make sure those conditions are upheld. And I oppose the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? So, does anybody want to put a motion forward to oppose the application?
Yes, Chairman, given that nobody has disagreed with me, I will propose that we refuse this as a grounds of impact on the Greenbelt, a new residential development being against planning policy. This was clearly conditioned only to be supplementary, and as such we shouldn't be granting permission.
Okay, second. Gentlemen, ladies, would you like to vote on that? On Councillor Phillips' proposal?
Oh, it's unanimous, Chair.
Okay.
Oh, was it? Sorry, apologies. 14.
And those against?
One abstention.
One abstention. And for the reason that Councillor Phillip gave, you've got those. Could you reflect those back, please, so we all understand?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. You've done it. You're on. Okay.
Yeah, if need be, we'll watch the recording again, so we'll issue the decision with the reasons for refusal.
Okay. In which case, that application has been rejected or not approved. And that brings us to exclusion of public and press. I don't think we've got any of that. So, therefore, I close the meeting at 20 to 10, or 9:40.